Moving on, Agile Charter. So here also some key points are there. I not read them out, but I'll try to explain each one of them. So similar to the project charter, the Agile Charter is also created, right? So this is not an addition to the project charter. So there are no two charters here. It is either the project charter in a traditional way or an agile charter in the agile way. So it all depends on the organization. If the organization is still following the waterfall methodology or just the traditional way of working, they don't do this agile charter. So the project charter is just a name, or agile charter is just a name. Don't get confused. The content within the charter is still the same. So what is the little change that we can see is the authorization to work in the agile way, right? So in the traditional project charter, there is no specification that you have to work in the agile way or not. It's just a project charter. But in the agile charter, you define all these roles and responsibilities. How do we differentiate agile charter with the project charter? Is that there will be a scrum identified, there will be a product owner identified, there will be a development team identified. So that is this next step. Who is who? There will be clear identification of roles and responsibilities within this project charter. So this is just a letter of authorization that you are allowed to start the agile way from a particular kickoff date. So the roles here, as I mentioned, they are not identified in depth. Okay, so they are vaguely identified, or they are just identified at a very broad level as per the company's hierarchy. Who can be the product owner? A new joinee who just joined the company last month, he cannot be the product owner. Of course, he might be a very senior person, but he doesn't know the way in and out of the process. If at all this is a senior person, he might be an option for a scrum master, because there the scrum master has to be strong in the methodology, but need not be strong in the product itself. So a product owner is somebody who knows in and out of the organization, who understands the project very much, who understands the way of the organization very much. So such care has to be taken in identifying all the stakeholders. Sometimes a few people are also excluded. So reasons being XYZ, whatever are the reason. So that person might be expecting to be part of the agile project, but he may be excluded because of some decision from the higher management. So once the agile charter is created with who is who identified, it is only these people who are considered as the core team. We have learned about what a core team is yesterday. Who are the core team? First, the scrum master. Second, the product owner. Third, the development team. That's it. Only these three characters, or these three persons are the core team. Only they run the scrum, or they run the agile project. So project is also outlined. We skip that part. So what happens here is, this document basically it outlines the total project goals, and the responsible stakeholders are also identified here. What is expected of the project, that is given. You have learned the project charter, right? There is nothing much detail there. It is just a single document, which is a letter of authorization. Right? So only basic and broad and vague things are mentioned here. But of course, who is the most important part that we should focus on. Moving on, agile models to understand the definition of done. We have understood what DOD is yesterday, right? DOD is nothing but definition of done, right? So we learned, or we touched upon this a bit very briefly yesterday. So what is this? This definition of done, it's a clear definition, or explanation of what the seller or buyer mean by the word done, or in other words, complete. But we don't use the word complete. The agile way is asking us as a project manager to use the word done only. So what happens is that at the end of the project, or at the end of the sprint, all those deliverables that we have targeted, they'll be listed, and then the customer evaluates all these list of completed items or done items at the end of each sprint. If the customer wishes that he participates in each sprint meeting, then he is totally allowed to do so, right? But this doesn't usually happen because the customer is busy doing his own level of works. So but he's allowed to. So if a seller or the stakeholder from the seller organization writes something as done against one of the tasks, the receiver or the buyer also should agree that this deliverable is done. If this kind of understanding is not there between both parties, then there are going to be a lot of disputes. So when closing these tasks, it is possible that one or two of these requirements started by the customer, they are closed or achieved, and the stakeholders are going to always tag it as completed or done. So this done is only from one perspective. So the perspective of the stakeholder who finished that job. No, but the end customer, we never know whether he's going to accept this or not. Right. So we don't have to do this for each and every task, because there are thousands and thousands of tasks done to complete a project. So the main important key deliverables which are pending for review, only they are reviewed usually by the stakeholder or the customer. So there the agreement becomes more and more important. So be sure about this. There will be a formal agreement between both the parties. This is pre-decided actually, right? So the seller and the buyer, much before the task or the bigger deliverable is actually executed or delivered, there will be a formal agreement about how the output of the project should be there, how it is going to be there. So if the customer agrees for this proposal, right? So you might ask a question: when the task is not complete, how do we know how it is going to look like? Right. So, for example, we are building a house, right? So we never know what is the final shape of the house, but we can do a plan of the house, right? A drawing of the house. The drawing need not be detailed, or at least how the shape is going to look like, right? So this kind of vague idea has to be given to them, and then as and when the project progresses, the vague idea starts to become slowly detailed. Even these detailed expressions have to be, keep on, we as a project manager, we have to keep on sending it to the customer and then keep on taking continuous feedback from the customer. That's what we mean by continuous feedback.